me that I paid for, I will wear that. For the meantime, Einstein and It's the Law will do, because after all, we are going to be talking about the law of supply and demand, among other things. And I see, once again, I've left some stuff from the previous lesson. I'll get rid of that. All right, for this lesson, we're going to talk about my specialty area, and I probably shouldn't say that in case it doesn't seem like it is. And one of my main specialty areas is the economics of school system reform. And we're going to talk here about how to create a model that explains what you can feel in your bones, namely, we have a nation at risk system. Okay, that's official. I didn't make that up. If you were to Google that, you would find, initially, you'd find a 1983 report by a bipartisan or nonpartisan commission that basically says our education system at the K through 12 level is a mess and our country is in jeopardy if we keep going at this. If another country had done it to us, it would be seen as an act of war. That phrase literally is in that report, and depending on how you view the term nation at risk, you could determine that several other reports have come out in the meantime that pretty much say the same thing, that our education system isn't nearly what it should be. Now, as an economics lesson, we can use this insight to think about the difference between an equilibrium and an optimum. Okay, because people are rational. That's what economics is about, is rational decision making. So rational decision making has produced a nation at risk system. Yeah, in other words, we've created laws and policies, governance, how the school system is to be run, who's in charge, and how we're going to pay for it, who we're going to get to pay the taxes, how we're going to allow people to pay for public school, private school, etc. Okay, governance and funding. That's the school system. And those are the kinds of things that people use as their guideposts for what rational means. Okay, based on what the rules are, people will act rationally with regard to that. So rational behavior over a period of about 150 years, since we changed a completely free market private system in about 150 years. Wow, it's more like 180 years. Back in still in the 1980s, I guess. Back in about 1830, we started creating public school systems. Before that, it was all the United States system, and others in the world were just purely free market systems, and with all the benefits and costs thereof. Yeah, if you were poor, you struggled to pay your way into a school in those days. Now, public schools, they're free, so no problem. But schools were a lot better then because they were competing and they were differentiated, and so, well, there's that marginal analysis things. Again, we gained some things and we lost some things in the meantime, and well, anyway, rational behavior has produced a nation at risk equilibrium, and by all means do Google that nation at risk term. I didn't make it up. It's bipartisan stuff, and it's reiterated periodically. So we have the combined result of millions of rational decisions given the current system to look at. And then we have to ask ourselves, okay, nation at risk, that means that the equilibrium must be way, way, way below the optimum. Yeah, and so what do we mean by an equilibrium and an optimum, by the way? Well, let's see, an equilibrium, what happens naturally from people comparing the costs to them to the benefits to them of acting differently. Marginal benefit equals marginal cost, defines the best amount of anything to individuals, to society, to whatever. Well, an equilibrium results from people individually making this determination. The quantity of everything. Even before you had an economics class, you never heard of this jargon. The quantity of everything that you rationally decided, okay, which means you thought about it, a little more, a little less, step on the gas pedal a little bit harder, not so hard, change the time on the alarm. All that's marginal analysis, quantity of things. Okay, so the quantity of anything related to schooling, behavior, how hard you try at things, whether you change the curriculum, whether you adjust it up or down, whether you show up earlier or later, whether you study hard, all of that, just all marginal analysis. And the equilibrium then is a bunch of MPCs, marginal private costs, equal marginal private benefit decision outcomes, all lumped together into one big giant mass of a school system where about 90% of people attend public schools and the other 10% of children attend private schools. And by the way, that's what I mean by a school system. I don't mean the public school system. I mean the whole school system. 100% of the schooling options, public and private, that is the school system that serves all of our school children. All right, so then the optimum, okay, so now we just take a different perspective, okay? The equilibrium is, okay, we're just going to let people do whatever they want to do within the rules and the incentives that we have. That's what happened. Nation at risk. Terrible situation. By the way, there's, to emphasize the non-part, that's pretty widely agreed to. And there's not very much controversy there. But sure, if you go to a public school district website, they'll say everything is great. But just about everybody else says, yeah, they disagree on how to improve it, but not on whether it needs a lot of improvement. So the optimum then is the best amount from society's perspective. Same thing, it's marginal analysis. Okay, but now it's marginal social costs versus marginal social benefits. And well, if the equilibrium is different than the optimum, that means okay, if the optimum differs from the equilibrium, then either the marginal social costs don't equal the marginal private costs, or the marginal social benefits don't equal the marginal private benefits, or both. And in this case, I would argue massively both, because that's the only way to explain an equilibrium being way, way, way different from an optimum. Now, the other part of this modeling exercise, and to, at least as a starting point, explain where we are, and then as an exercise to say, okay, if these are way, way different, and they are, then one or the other, okay, so yes, which one, or both, and then why? You see, then we're halfway at least to, okay, what are we going to do about this mess? Right? If we can figure out why the optimum and the equilibrium are so far apart, then we might be pointed in the right direction for, okay, what can we do to bring them together, and hopefully not bring the optimum down to the equilibrium, but the other way around, to bring the equilibrium up to the optimum. Okay, so first of all, we can establish, deciding what color to use next. So with blue, we can first establish that marginal benefits and costs, whether we make them marginal or private, look normal. Okay, normal. What does that mean? Do you do more of something, total benefits rise at a slower and slower rate. That's what this means. Okay? It doesn't mean the total benefits are going down. It means the rate at which they're going up is getting smaller and smaller. Right? As you do more of something, right, total benefits get more and more. Right? But the addition to the total benefits gets smaller and smaller. That's what normal means. And marginal costs, it means the opportunity costs per unit get bigger the more you do of something. Right? The more you step on the gas pedal, the bigger the risk is, and the faster it increases. Okay, is one example of that. Now, one thing that I've left off of here that's a critical part of any time you ever use marginal analysis. Now, I definitely, both classes, absolutely, positively, this applies. What goes down here? Marginal benefit of what exactly? Marginal cost of what exactly? Better always do that before you put an MB or an MC term. That's a tough one. What I finally came up with after some fudging and hemming and hawing and what's going on here is what I think we want to talk about in talking about the equilibrium versus optimum in terms of K through 12 is fostering pursuit of academic excellence. Because you can't. It's not like a lemon or a car, okay, or a cup of coffee where you can just make them. I mean, you can't say, okay, you're going to be an 8th grader next year. You're going to learn this much. Hopefully, you can't. It's not like a pill. You just shove it in there. Okay, now you're a year smarter than you were last year. No, you try. You do what you can to try to get it to be learned. Okay, fostering pursuit of academic excellence. See, now, of course, it's something that takes work. Okay, so the marginal cost, right? The more work we put into it and the more people working on it, right, and giving up other things in society, right, other things that those smart people could be doing instead of teaching or administrating a school or driving a school bus or all the things that are involved in getting kids to expand their intellectual horizons. And then, of course, I hate to say this as an educator, but there are decreasing returns to doing that, right? I mean, if there's total ignorance, if there's complete ignorance, well, then a unit of pursuit of academic excellence is worth an awful lot. But if everybody's already a rocket scientist, then making them a little smarter isn't worth all that much. Okay, so that's all we're saying by the MB sloping down. The smarter you are, the less important it is to get even smarter. Well, in some cases, brain surgeon about to operate on your head. But anyway, most of the time, and generally speaking, right, the smarter you are, the less valuable or important it is to get just another increment smarter. And if you're not too smart at all, or society doesn't have that much knowledge or schooling, well, then it's very, very important. So, yeah, up to a point, yeah, the additional benefits are worth the opportunity costs. All right, so that said, let's go to the slightly prettier looking graph on the overhead, and we can see what I've come up with is my hypothesis that I'm going to back with the various reasons why it should be so. Didn't come up. Ah, there it is. Okay, so there we have the marginal social cost, and there we have the marginal private cost. So, see, in my model, I'm alleging something about the real world. I'm saying I've modeled it. Okay, this is my model. Okay, and MPC, that is supply. MSC is what we wish it would be, but what people are going to supply is going to be based on what the costs are to them, marginal private cost. Okay, and then MPB, that's demand, right? And well, we wish it was this, but no, that's going to actually dictate their behavior, what the cost is to them. We're talking about the marginal benefits to the providers, the people that foster the pursuit of academic excellence. Okay, so we're talking about the benefits to the educators for the most part, and the costs to them of fostering the pursuit of academic excellence. So you see over here we have, there's our equilibrium. Now let me take this one piece at a time here. What am I alleging when I put the MPC way above the MSC? I'm alleging technical inefficiency, that things cost a lot more to produce than is necessary under better conditions. And of course it's incumbent upon me to back that with some explanation. But that's what my model says here, is the marginal private cost. What it costs to actually do it is a lot more than what it could cost to do it. Most of the time when you see an MC line written up there, it may not be said, but it's implied, we're assuming technical efficiency. We're assuming no waste, that things are done as well as they can possibly be done without waste or loss. I'm saying no, they're not in actuality. They could be done at this cost, MSC, but no, they're really done at that cost. I'll provide the reasons here momentarily. Okay, so there's our equilibrium. MPB is equal to MPC, right? The behavior will lead us to here, given that things are very costly to do, and that the individual providers, those fostering the pursuit of academic excellence, don't see much private benefit in doing so. Just to kind of get you a little past the jargon before we get into it, or the abstractness of it. What's a big deal underlying this? There's no merit pay in K through 12 schooling, at least not in the 90% that's public school system. Okay, so the fact that there's an MPB line on this graph at all is just based on intangible benefits. In other words, loving children, wanting the children to do well, but not seeing any of that in your paycheck when you do a better job of it. Okay, so there's no merit pay for the most part. It's very rare. Okay, so the tangible MPB for fostering the pursuit of academic excellence is zero for the most part. Now, the intangible, yeah, people love children. They want to do a good job. They take pride in their work. You know, that's there, but we know from human history that the intangibles like that don't take you all that far. You need some concrete incentives, some real rewards in most cases to drive the kind of behavior that you want. You want your incentives aligned with what you want to have achieved. Okay, so I won't jump ahead on any of the other things, just to say that, okay, so then over here we have the optimum, right, the MSC, this is the amount of pursuit of academic excellence, that given that the resources have other uses and the value of getting even smarter converge at that point where it's, okay, that's how much we want to do. Yeah, we'd love to be even smarter, but that would take away more resources from other things than it's worth to get a little smarter. Right? Not worth less, but worth less than the cost at some point, given that there's a lot of other things like healthcare and environment and other ways to spend resources to do good things. Okay, now you're wondering, well, why? What is this P thing? Why is that above the one above the? I don't know from my hypothesis whether that point should be higher or lower than that point. I'm thinking that at $13,000 per child per year, it's pretty high, and it probably would be lower in a more efficient system, but that's just a guess. The nation at risk thing, yeah, I'm 99.9% certain that the equilibrium here, right here, is way below the optimum based on all the evidence that I've seen. Okay, so back to me. Okay, so what's the deal here? Why is the actual MPC? I'll go without the graph. Why is the actual MPC believed? What are the concrete reasons? Forgive me for using that term over and over again. Concrete for believing that the MPC is greater than the MSC. And one of this piece right here. Well, one reason is that because the way our system deals with the diversity of children is by building comprehensive giant schools. Okay, not a very good way to deal with the diversity of children, because it still means that from one school to the next, and even within the giant building, a shopping mall-like building, one size seems to fit all, which it seems to, but it really doesn't. On top of that, it turns out to be quite important politically to have uniformity from one school to the next, because otherwise you'd say, well, why are they doing that in that school and not in mine? That works pretty well for over there. Why can't we have that? We pay the same taxes as them. So it's pretty much a political imperative to have everything produced politically, namely in the public part of the overall school system, all the schools to be pretty much doing the same thing. And we know from economics that one of the keys to productivity is specialization. Right? Remember that from chapter 2? Okay, and then chapter 1 for you guys, gals. So no specialization. Right? Every school's got to be doing pretty much the same thing. It'd be like having restaurants that were all cafeterias. Right? All big giant cafeterias. Those will be the only choices you had. Big giant cafeterias. Lots of choices in the building. Okay, the cafeteria. You can order that, or you can have that, or put that on your plate. But that means that every building's got to have the same chefs. All have to have the same skills. No, that generally doesn't work. So one of the reasons for the marginal private cost to be way above the marginal social cost is that politically it's very difficult not to have uniformity, and because children differ, it's also difficult not to attempt comprehensiveness within the uniform campuses that are attempted from one place to the next. It drives up costs. Comprehensive schools are so complicated that one researcher has demonstrated that it fosters a lot of fraud and deception, not to mention student alienation. Students do better in smaller schools. What's the problem with smaller schools? It doesn't provide much diversity of offerings for different children to be engaged in the thing. So what do? If you have uniform smaller schools, you can't handle the diversity of the children assigned to them. If you have school choice, then you can have different schools do different things, and people choose, and the schools can specialize. See, that's one of the ways that I would allege that you could bring the MSC and the MPC together, is not have the schools all be trying to do the same thing, let each of them specialize in comparative advantage. Can't be done in a political system because of the uniformity imperative. Right? People would complain if somebody else's assigned school did something more or better than their assigned school did. And you can't assign children to specialized schools based on where they live, because it might not be a good fit for them. Let me give you an example that I use a lot. let's suppose some entrepreneur is watching TV with his children, one a girl and one a boy, and the sports comes on the news. And his boy he just goes nuts. He just goes, totally focused into everything he's doing on his calculators, figuring the batting averages and all of that's going on, and whatever sport, it depends on what time of year it is. And Dad, being a businessman, thinks, I bet there's a lot of kids like my little Johnny that would just go nuts if they could just learn their ABCs and their, why sports. Okay, so he goes out and he starts a sports school. It's a private school. He's a problem, though, because the alternative, the public school, is free, and he has to charge tuition. So now you have an idea why there aren't many private schools. It's hard to sell something with a free consumption substitute. But okay, let me just assume for the moment it's a charter school, not a private school. So it's free too. Charter public school is an independent private school that is a school of choice, and so they are free to specialize, but they're not free to charge tuition. So the only things they can do is to offer schooling that costs less than the amount the government pays. If it costs more, then you have to find a donor to cover the difference. Okay, so we're back to Dad noticing that Johnny goes nuts over sports and thinking, I bet there are other kids just like that. And so he starts a sports themed school, not athletics. I'm sure maybe for PE, but we're going to teach math through batting averages and all kinds of sports numbers. And we're going to teach social studies based on how leagues decide things and that kind of thing. And we're going to teach reading and writing based on reading about sports and writing sports stories for the newspaper or something. So anyway, that's what we mean by specialization. Now, imagine yourself assigning children based on where they live to a school like that. I mean, come on, some of the kids are going to sit there and go, yuck, I got to go to school today. Daddy, don't make me, please. They're teaching sports. I hate sports. Okay, now, of course, some of the kids, wow, man, oh man, there's a sports-themed school in our neighborhood. Oh my goodness, I love it. Okay, but you see, a school like that has to be a school of choice, right? To where the kids, oh yeah, wow, I'm, cool, and then the others say, no, I want Daddy take me somewhere else, and then they do. All right, so anyway, so one of the reasons that comprehensiveness and uniformity increases cost is because it doesn't do a very good job at addressing diversity, nor does it do of children as well as the diversity of the adults, right? Because the adults all have things that they're better at and not so good at. So anyway, so that's one of the reasons for MPC more than MSC. And probably the main reason. Another reason why it costs a lot more than it could to produce the schooling that we produce and other schooling that maybe we should produce is that there's very little teacher autonomy. And if I think of my situation as a professor compared to my wife, who used to be a teacher, and she was told what to teach, how to teach it, and with what books to teach it with. Okay? And the kids were put in her room based on what neighborhood they lived in. And within that, not a whole lot of sorting. It was, well, if you're the last teacher hired, you get all the kids that the other teachers, if they know them already, don't want. But anyway, it's a very diverse room in terms of the kids, learning issues just because they're randomly assigned, except by age and by neighborhood. Okay, so teachers are not in any real meaningful sense treated like professionals because they're told what to do and how to do it. And so they're less engaged in what they're doing as a result. Their areas of strength are not utilized. They're expected to be just as good as every other teacher at everything. Clearly not true when my wife was a teacher. There were things that other teachers were better at least had a comparative advantage compared to her. She didn't like me telling her that. But I had to explain what comparative advantage. I said, but dear, you have an absolute advantage. Okay, you're better at than they are. But you're 10 times as good at doing discipline stuff. And she was very, very good at the discipline stuff. You're only this much better at doing the other stuff. So the teachers would have discipline problem kids. They should send those to your room, and the other kids, you can send them off to their room because they're almost as good as you are. Oh, okay, dear. Okay, I understand. She was okay with it then. See, comparative advantage versus absolute advantage. Very important. But so she didn't have any of that kind of autonomy. She did, she had books were, use this book. And towards the end of her tolerance of that career, and she kind of got burned out and left, as a lot of teachers do. She was in kind of the micromanagement teacher-proof era, where the upper people in the system were so frustrated by the difficulties, passing the tests and all of that, that they would increasingly micromanage exactly what one does what book you teach out of, what lesson you teach of, and how many days you spend on it. Just even more of that, and you can imagine if a teacher is saying, here, these are teacher-proof materials. Think like, why did you hire me? Why didn't you just hire somebody off the street without any education and just, anyway. So, but it's because the system is designed to be difficult to succeed in, not deliberately, but it's evolved in that sense. And so teachers are seen as the culprits, even though they're probably next to the children victims, just like the kids are, for the same reason. And so the frustrated purveyors of the system are trying to script their jobs in increasingly great detail, which makes the teachers less and less efficient at doing what everybody thinks that every teacher should be doing. Again, MPC greater than MPC in the model is the bottom line of what I'm spending probably too much time explaining, because I'm too much into this stuff for, at least for a lesson, for a YouTube video. Okay, and as a result of assigning children to classrooms based on just what neighborhood they live in and that they're the same age as the other kids in the room, and the teacher is struggling to address all of these different. Go back to my example with Johnny, there's this kid that the daddy watches is crazy about sports. He's sitting there thinking about sports, and they're talking about something else. He's not engaged in what's going on. If they start talking about sports, he'd start paying attention, but then some other kids would tune out because they're not engaged in the theme that the instructor happens to use, and there is no one theme in that diverse of a classroom. By the way, when I say diverse, I hope you don't think that I mean Hispanic or black or what. No, the diversity that I'm talking about is in the engagement factors, how you learn, and the things that are interesting to you that make you pay attention. That's the kind of diversity that's problematic in a school system. If you don't sort the kids in terms of how they learn or what engages them in learning, like a sports theme could do that for some children, then the teacher has a much harder job of having multiple lesson plans. I saw a picture one time on the internet from the New York Times. It showed a teacher so frustrated with the differences in her children that she had grouped them in different tables in her classroom. Poor teacher, I'm sure she had to have different lesson plans for each of the different tables, the faster kids at math and the slower kids at math and the medium kids at math. And then kids would be at a different table if moved to social studies or English. Okay, now you're with the fast kids, you were with the slow kids. Speaking of which, my buddy here, Einstein, he was almost put in the equivalent of special ed when he was a kid, because while he was literally a rocket scientist, even as a kid at math, he was really bad in English. He struggled to read. See, so this idea of tracking, that's not the same thing as ability grouping by subject. But anyway, so back to the MPC, MSC explanation. Because kids are not uniformly good or bad at different things, you want to group them by ability, by subject, but to do that within a classroom, even though some teachers attempt it, is nearly impossible because it's just so costly to do it. It's called differentiated instruction. Teach one way to these kids, teach another way to those kids, use this example with those kids, use that example with those other kids. And then you combine that with the fact that there isn't any merit pay, no reward for doing all this additional work to reach all these different kids, and some teachers. And then the other part that makes it hard for the teachers is that the parents are upset. Hey, my little Johnny's not learning. Why not? Well, because your Johnny isn't quite in the mainstream. Nothing wrong with him, but he's a little different than the other kids. He's not interested in some of the examples that I use. He learns a little differently. And so, sorry, Johnny's an outlier. And the teacher's not going to say that, but that's what the truth is. And so, nothing wrong with the teacher. He or she may be doing great, but it's just not working for Johnny. He needs a specialized teacher, and maybe with a sports theme, so he'll pay attention. Or teach by a computer. Maybe he doesn't interact well with people. He's an introvert. So he would do much better online instruction as opposed to face-to-face instruction. Quite the opposite. Somebody else stuck in front of a computer to learn is like, put me in front of a human being to talk to me, kind of a deal. Okay, so and then if you wonder how we could accomplish all of this, in other words, all this specialization and engaging kids and sorting, and say, okay, fine, school choice. Yeah, let's let You need a price system to coordinate all of that. In other words, you need some signaling mechanism to know, for the parents to know where to take their kids. And they're not all going to cost the same. That's one of the problems. Some specialty areas that work better for some kids than others are going to cost more than others. And how the educators and the entrepreneurs to know what kinds of schools to create. You need a price system. And as I often lament in my blogs and other places where I do my work, and other than the research that I do, is that we have a priceless system. In other words, there are no price signals. There's no way for anybody to know that it's time to start a school that has a sports theme, for example, or a medical theme, or a business theme. There's no way to know whether we have enough or too few or too many of a school that teaches by, say, the Montessori method, or by online method, or by face-to-face method. The price system does all of that. In other words, let's go back to the example with the sports school. Okay, so Dad's not watching Johnny get all excited about sports, thinking, no, Johnny's not doing very well in school. Other kids are like, Johnny, if I start a sports school, charter school, hopefully, because then I can compete. I don't have to charge any tuition, and I can do it cheaply enough to get by with the government money that they pay for that. Then I can attract all these kids to this school, and I can make myself a lot of money. You see, they're seeing a price signal, what the government pays to the charter operator, thinking, I think I can make money at that price. So they start a school. What if they do? Other people will know, wow, look how successful they are. See, that's how the price system works. They're making money hand over fist doing this curriculum with sports and everything, costing way less than what the government's paying them. I can do that too. It's called copycat entrepreneurship. So they jump in there, and pretty soon there's competition, right? And then they drive the price down if it can go down. That's the pricelessness aspect of it. If there's no price system, there's no way to know to jump in there anyway, and there's no price signaling method to signal others to jump in or when not to jump in. That, they're hardly making any money at that. No, I don't think I want to do that. I see some of your writing. I appreciate that. I'll let you catch up. So I take a deep breath. One of the other reasons that it's expensive, MPC greater than MSC, is because we have a compliance-driven system. There's lots and lots of rules that are laws. You must comply. Now, fostering the pursuit of academic excellence, that's sort of a nebulous prime directive, yes, but sort of, it's not a law. You can't force people to learn. You can't force them to recycle things and to do X, Y, and Z, and to have this many crossing guards and to have teachers that have only this many years of this, those are all things that are enforceable. Well, by the time you enforce all those other things, you may have, and often have, forgotten and have run out of time and resources to attend to the things that are not a law, even if they may be the prime directive, namely, hey, we're here to foster the pursuit of academic excellence among the children. Why is the system so resistant to change, given that I'm probably, among some of these things, no one else has said them yet other than me, but many others have been raised before as issues. Why do we assign children based only on residence to schools? Why do we sort them only by age into grades? Why don't we have ability grouping by subject more than we do? There's a bunch of different reasons. It's convenient, right, to not have to search out schools. You can read about the New Orleans system, about it. People wish they didn't, because now they have some school choice in New Orleans. After Katrina flattened out their public school system, they rebuilt as a chartered public school system, which means schools of choice. But that means you got to search all the schools for a good one, and given that there's no price system to organize it, many of the schools had wait lists, so you could choose one and you couldn't get in. So they were very frustrated. There are a lot of them, why just give me the old system back, assign me to the school, my kid to a school that's near our house, and do whatever he or she needs. Well, they tried that in New Orleans, and that was one of the worst school systems in the nation. But it has its appeal, namely, we all want to have our neighborhood public school that's just one size fits all for all the kids assigned to it, and it decently fits probably a majority of children if it's not a totally dysfunctional school. So the parents, when confronted with, should we have school choice? Will say, well, that'll hurt my public school. Some of the kids would leave. Okay, maybe some of the money would leave. No, let's not do that. So, maybe only 40% of the kids need an alternative. 60% doing okay in public school. Well, the 60 outnumbers 40 in a political system that says, hey, I'm not going to let it change. Keep things the way they are. And of course, it's always hard to imagine is just how good, and it may not be good, it would be if you can't see one. Okay? You know what you're going to give up. That's okay. It's working okay. You're not sure what you might get. It might not work all that well. So you say, nah. Okay, so there's a lot of conveniences in it, in the current system, and there's also a lot of power in the current system and how it's evolved, and those are probably the main blockages to change. These same old concentrated benefits, dispersed costs theme that you keep running into over and over again of why things stay the way they are or got the way they are to begin with is part of the school system story, and why in 1983 a national commission can say we're a nation at risk, and in 2016 there's been 5 or 6 other reports that have said the same thing, and we're still debating about what, if anything, to do about it. We're still stuck. Okay, I see that we're running out of time both for the room and for everything else. So let me just cover the last part, the MPB by MSB part, and then I think we'll be done for the day. All right. So on the other part of the graph, since it's been a while and I've been rambling, let me just go back to it quickly to summarize. So we've been talking about some of the more readily understandable reasons for technical inefficiency, namely why the MPC line is above the MSC line, and that's part of why equilibrium is there and the optimum is here. Now the other part of it, the main part of that difference that we've already mentioned already, let's just summarize that, and there's no merit pay. Okay, now, yes, it's true, it's very difficult to measure merit in a system in which there's no school choice and no prices. Okay, so the teachers and their unions are justifiable in saying, yeah, merit pay sounds great, except how do you measure it? And then the next part of the equation is how do you fund it? Because you see, in the business world, merit funds itself, right? Merit attracts customers, and you have more money to spend. In the school system world, everybody's already a customer, right? All the kids are enrolled. Okay, so you're not going to get any additional consumers in there. You might, if you had a different system, get some of them to be willing to pay more, but merit is not self-funding in the school system we have now, and merit is hard to measure. So there are 2 good reasons by themselves why we have a system in which there is no tangible reward or punishment for being effective, or in the case of punishment, ineffective. Teachers, like professors, have tenure after a few years. Never understood why that applies to K through 12 teachers. For professors, it's because our research might be controversial and we should be immune from being persecuted for our findings. But for K through 12 teachers, they don't do research, they teach. So I guess the way they teach and what they teach could be controversial, maybe I'm not sure. But anyway, they do have tenure after a few years, and so even if they burn out, as they often do, or get dissatisfied with tolerating the conditions that they struggle under, the diversity of children that somehow the parents are all demanding that they serve all those different abilities and engagement factors well, nearly an impossible task. So, yes, merit pay is hard to implement, but without it, we have no tangible reward for being effective and none for ineffective, and therefore we have, oh, I still had the thing up there. Anyway, so we, now I turned it off. That's why we have the MPC, or MPB, MSB differences. No tangible reward for fostering the pursuit of academic excellence.